How's it going, everybody? This is the Uncanny Omar from Near Mint Condition, the home of collected editions, and I have two wonderful folks with me today. I have Jeannine Acheson and Tom Sniegoski, and both of them are here to talk about their career in comics and Vampirella and what they're currently working on and where you may have seen them before. Thank you both for joining me today, and thank you to Amy from Dynamite for putting this together. And yeah, how did this happen? How did both of you end up working on the same book? And who wants to go first? I want to know where you both started with comic books as fans first.
Yes, yeah, she has the far more interesting story than I do.
Well, yours is very interesting. I am a former middle school teacher, and about 4.5 years ago, I contacted Tom, who was a high school friend of mine, because I wanted to have an author who had a book made into a movie, because I was doing a new unit with my students. Mm-hmm. So I contacted Tom, and he graciously agreed to come and talk to 307th graders in Danvers, Massachusetts, about what it was like to have his books, The Fallen, turned into a movie trilogy. And we kind of kept on talking, and we just never stopped. So then the pandemic hit. This is the very short version. The pandemic hit, and we decided to write a novel together.
Okay.
And while we were doing that, Nikki Barucci at Dynamite asked Tom if he wanted to write a Valentine's Day special for Vampirella. And he said, sure, I'm working with a new writer, and maybe she'd like to try it too. And Nikki said, sure. And Tom asked me if I wanted to write a Vampirella Valentine's Day special. And I was like, at this point in my life, sure, why not? I'll do it. I was just kind of saying yes to anything that came along at that point. And we wrote that for Valentine's Day, February 2021. And that was my first comic. So it's been like 3 years, 3.5 years.
Okay, well, then I have to ask the very obvious question. When Tom asked you if you would like to co-write with him, did you know who Vampirella was? Were you a fan of comics?
I did. I did know who Vampirella was. I was always, I wasn't a big comic reader for a lot of my life. I read some comics in high school. And then Tom and I kind of went our separate ways as friends. And when we came back together again, he was writing... What were you writing?
I was writing Vengeance of Vampirella.
Vengeance of Vampirella. And I started to read those. And he would kind of show me how a script was written. And he'd give me a script. And then when the layouts came in, he'd show me those according to the script. And he kind of took me through it step by step. And I learned, I'm still learning how to write comics, but he kind of took me through it step by showing me that run that he was doing at the time. So yeah, I just kind of fell into writing comics backwards.
I love it. You started this with, I was a 5th grade teacher.
Yeah.
I think that's wonderful. And now you're writing Vampirella.
And now I'm writing Vampirella.
Because you kept the friendship alive. Like, had you two remain in contact, or was it through social media?
No, I was a teacher, so I wasn't on social media. I had a thing about it.
Good for you.
But Tom and I didn't talk for about, I don't know, almost 40 years.
40 years?
You all don't. Friends on social media.
You don't.
And they kind of flowered from there. Yeah, it was all very I don't know, very like Kismet-like. It was very strange. Like I contacted him out of the blue, and I'm like, I don't know if you remember me, but we were friends in high school. He's like, yeah, I remember you. And he still offered to come, so that was good.
So it was good memories that he had. That's awesome. And Tom, how about you? In that time that you didn't see Jeannine, what were you doing?
I was just hanging out waiting for her to send me an email.
That's what I thought. That's what I kind of figured was going on.
No, I started in comics, then had a pretty elaborate book career writing novels, which I still kind of dabble in. and now I'm back in comics. So it's like this weird. I don't even know. It was almost as if the pandemic ignited the comic bug again.
Mm-hmm.
So comics, novels, and then comics again with a sprinkle of novels.
Yeah.
And when you two, well, I guess when you heard from Jeannine to come and talk to her students about your book and your book series and then your movies, how did that even go from that to, hey, you want to co-write a book with me?
Well, it's kind of strange because it was one of those things where she would talk about writing. There would be it gave me an inkling that there was an interest in there somewhere. And like a lot of the courses that she took when in her graduate programs and stuff like that, and I kind of got a sense that she probably wanted to write. So I started to ask her more questions about her writing and what kind of writing she's done. And she started to show me things that she'd done for some classes and things. And it was just one of those things where it just kind of evolved. It was almost as if she was kind of keeping it hidden, and I was kind of pulling it out. I was kind of like, all right, there's more here like I thought there was. And let's see if I can cultivate that a bit to get her to the next stage. And the comic thing was pretty much like, that was a fluke. I was asked to, Nikki asked to do it. We were talking and we were writing at the time, and I was kind of like, hey, how would you like to write a comic? And she just kind of was like, yeah, I'll give that a shot. What the heck?
Okay, so how different was that experience? Okay, Tom went from comics to books, and then back to comics. But how about you, Jeannine? How is that experience different than writing a novel, like with somebody?
All of it, since we started writing together, all of it has been an unbelievable experience. It's funny because I taught seventh grade for 15 years, and I taught writing. I taught English. And I remember talking to my students and telling them things like, you've got to get down and get dirty in it. You've got to make a mess so that you can, really find your plot and find out who your characters are. And honestly, it was all true. And I think that I kind of presented to my students that I was an expert in all of this. But when I started writing professionally, I had realized I had no idea what I was talking about.
I forgot to say this earlier. God bless you, Jeannine, for being a teacher in middle school. My gosh, my wife is a high school English teacher, and she's been on it for 12, 13 years now.
Wow. Yeah.
She took a little break in between, though, all those years, and didn't write comics or a novel, but she did take a little bit of a break, and now she's back doing it. And I used to work for the Board of Education, and I remember thinking, elementary school kids are adorable. High school kids, I could probably teach.
Yeah.
Middle school, you're a gift from God, because you you loved it. Okay.
I did. I loved it until I didn't. And there was a point at about probably, I don't know. And I think when Tom and I first started talking again, there was a point where I was like, I'm ready to retire, but I think I need something else to do. I didn't want to just retire and not have something to do. So this is kind of like my fourth career in my life. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
I love that.
It just kind of happened very organically and very naturally. It's kind of strange the way it happened.
Well, to a lot of kids that were in your class, you're a big inspiration, because it's like, hey, you remember our teacher?
Yeah.
She's now writing Vampirella.
Yeah. Yeah. And I still have my friends, a number of my friends who are obviously English teachers still talk about like, oh, remember Mrs. Acheson from a few years ago? Well, she's got a new comic book coming out, or she's, she finished her novel, or
I love
So
that.
it is, and I'm hoping that they take inspiration from that.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I know. I mean, when I was in middle school, if I found out one of my teachers retired and went to write comics, I would be like, oh my gosh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Tom, how was it coming back into comics for you? Was it like riding a bike? Did you distance
I mean,
comics so much that you forgot?
Well, no. The thing is that my fingers were always in it somewhat. I mean, I'm still a big reader, so I was always reading, and I have a lot of friends in the industry, so I was always hearing what was going on in the industry. The books, a lot of the times, would just take up so much time that I couldn't really fit comics in. But occasionally, one would bubble to the surface, and I would jump from a book to a comic, back and forth. But no, I don't think it's definitely like riding a bike. Once you've done it, you don't forget how to do it.
Okay, I love that.
I mean, and again, I've been writing comics since the 90s.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean,
what was it like writing with Jeannine? I guess you both had worked in the novel side.
Yeah, we did a novel over Skype.
Yeah.
With Google Docs, we literally wrote a novel together, back and forth.
Yeah.
Over
during the pandemic.
Yeah. But writing comics was really different because she really didn't have a foundation at all. I mean, even right down to she didn't even read all that many comics. So it was kind of tough. I started to like give her certain comics and say, hey, take a look at that and look at these things and how this particular writer or this particular artist tells the story. Mm-hmm. And then I would kind of use that as like a jumping off point for when we were starting to put the script together for, like, say, for example, the Vampirella Valentine's Day special. So it's kind of like I took it in segments. I took it in pieces and had her looking at different things in different comics or different collections and tried to incorporate that into once we sat down to actually start laying out an actual comic.
Yeah. Similar to the way I would teach my students. I'd have them, if we were writing short stories, I'd have them look at a short story just particularly for character. How does the author portray the character in this, or plot? Like, what's the story arc look like? So it was really the same thing. The teacher became the student.
And Tom is no stranger though to working with people, because I mentioned earlier, I'm completely butchering your name when reviewing like the Hellboy stuff, and because you have worked with Mike Mignola and Christopher Golden.
Yeah,
but you also did it was with Jeff Smith, right?
Yeah, I did the right. Yeah. I wrote Bone. I'm the only guy who ever wrote Bone, other than Jeff.
That's awesome. So you are used to collaborating on comics with people. So to you, it was kind of like, I guess, just kind of teaching Jeannine the ropes.
Yeah, I mean, there's a enormous difference between collaborating with somebody who knows how to do it and collaborating with somebody who doesn't know how to do it, because you have to be very aware of the fact that you're speaking another language in a lot of time.
That's what it was like.
Yeah. It was really funny. One of the things that we did, she tried to, like, you could see her trying her damnedest, like, I'm going to get this no matter what. And she started like taking like notes as I was talking.
Oh yeah.
And she started to tape the notes. Like, she'd fill a piece of paper and she'd tape another piece of paper to that piece of paper. And finally we had this like monstrosity that was taped to my bookcase. Yeah. It was like this massive puzzle with arrows, and it was like the crime scene thing, and when the serial killer is killing somebody with the red tape and the red thread.
So tell me about this recent Vampirella, because Tom, you had written Vampirella before.
Oh yeah, I wrote Vampirella in the 90s, and then
now you're coming back to Vampirella with
Jeannine
Dynamite, and this is Dark Reflection. So what makes this one so different than the past things that you have done with the character?
This is actually kind of a continuation / spinoff from a book that Jeannine and I did called Vampirella, which was the story of the multiple universes called the Fabric, which each thread of the fabric has a different Vampirella. So you have Vampirellas, like all kinds of different kinds of Vampirellas and all kinds of different universes. And that was kind of like the plot of Vampirella. And in this particular, the Dark Reflections takes a character that we introduced in Vampirella, whose name is Lilith, who is the daughter of a Vampirella who died in one of these universes, and sends her on a mission to yet another piece of the fabric to save a Vampirella of that world. So you have this that's where the Dark Reflections title comes from. You have literally a daughter of Vampirella and an actual Vampirella who are coming together to solve this great big massive problem in this particular world.
So Jeannine, for you, so Tom had written Vampirella before, but for you, you knew of the character. So how did you prepare for writing this with Tom?
I had read some of Tom's Vampirella run. I read a little bit of Christopher Priest's Vampirella run just to kind of get a feel for the character. And then, honestly, I think I just kind of jumped in with both feet, took a leap of faith, and really I followed Tom's lead, and I kind of got to know the character, I think, through his eyes. At that point, writing that very first Vampirella and then writing the miniseries Vampirella, I was still very confused about writing comics and how to do it. So there was a lot of hand holding and a lot of like having to talk things through a lot about the character, about her motivation for things, about her history. So I also like went on a lot of like wikis online just to kind of read what people said about the character and her history and that kind of stuff. So I kind of learned on the fly.
But
writing.
What's interesting about that is her looking for information about Vampirella and different people's takes, as well as my take, actually brought something kind of different to our storytelling, because it wasn't a straight Tom Sniegoski Vampirella story. It was somebody else's interpretation that she learned through reading the comics and reading WikiLeaks and whatever, and to get her interpretation. So it actually made the take that we gave them very different than the take that I would have normally given them. So I think Jeannine was actually a benefit to those stories, because it gave it a different flavor, another perspective.
And a woman's perspective too.
And a woman's perspective too. Yeah, actually, that's true.
Yeah.
So when you saw, I have to ask this because I'm living vicariously through Jeannine. This is amazing. How was it seeing your plot and dialogue for the first time come in like a page, like somebody's art, like your stuff is drawn out by an artist? Tom's been at it for a long time, so he knows what it feels like to have his, words and things being drawn by somebody and seeing that for the first time. But how was that for you?
It honestly indescribable. It was. I have her up on my. Can you see her up on my wall? I have the very first Vampirella. There she is.
Oh yeah. Okay. Look at you.
Tom gave me that.
Tom.
I think to see our artist Daniel Main, who's been with us since forever, to see his interpretation of like the words that we put on the page was incredible. Like, and I think he's so good at what he does that he kind of, I don't know, he makes our words, or mine anyway, look so much better. But to walk into, I think at one point it was still during we were coming out of the pandemic and we weren't really going out a lot. When we did, people were still masking up and things. And I remember going to a comic store and seeing it on the shelf, and it blew my mind. Like, it completely blew my mind. Like, my husband took pictures with me and we sent them to Tom. Like, look what's on the shelf. That was crazy. Like, crazy. Like, I don't know. I just, sometimes I can't really pinpoint the feeling that I have at the turn that my life has taken in the past, like, several years. It just blows my mind.
How long is the Vampirella Dark Reflections? How long is that going to go?
I think that's 5 issues. 5 issues, but with plenty of room to either continue or to spin off into the next story that will continue that story. But yeah, it's 5. That particular story is 5 issues.
So, Jeannine, did this scratch that itch, or do you want more? Would you like to continue?
Oh,
writing?
I'd love to do more.
Okay.
I would love. There's so many different Vampirellas that I feel we need to explore. There's just so many, and I think there's a lot of stories out there that we could tell. She's a fascinating character. She's fascinating.
And is there anybody else, any other characters that you would like to write one day? Now that you've written Vampirella with Tom, like, do you see yourself writing another character? A favorite of yours when you were a kid, or even ones that you've seen, in the movies?
I don't know. Honestly, at this, and it sounds funny, honestly, at this point in my life, I am open to just about anything that would come my way. So I don't know that there's anybody. I mean, I love Batman, but I don't think I would ever dare try to do that character justice. So I don't know. I can't really think of anybody.
Well, we've been doing actually a lot of create our own stuff.
That's true.
We have a couple of create our own projects that are in the pipeline. So it's very interesting to see something that we don't have a history to fall back on that we're creating from scratch, which is really kind of interesting because we're doing that layering. We're like, starting out with the basic premise of an idea, a germ, and that germ's suddenly growing into something much more pronounced than just a little lightning strike that, that's a good idea. We should do that.
Can you tell us about the create our own stuff that's coming, or if that's something that you haven't had?
No, we can talk about. We have a book through Mad Cave Studios called Soul Taker. That's coming out in July. Yeah, and that idea, the germ of that idea, came from Jeannine.
Yours truly.
She actually started the thing that became this comic.
Yeah.
So
I thought it was going to be a short story.
So tell me the pitch of that book.
So it's funny, the way it came about is actually interesting. One day, Tom and I were chatting. It was a Saturday afternoon in the wintertime, actually, and he had been to visit his elderly mom. And I asked him how she was doing, and he said, "Oh, she's still old." And I said, "Haha, wouldn't it be funny if, like, the next time you went, she was 10 years younger, and then every time after that, she got younger and younger and younger as she started to age backwards?" And he's like, "Oh, that's a really fun idea." And it kind of grew into the story that's called Soul Taker. And it's about a woman who is a different race. She's thousands of years old. She's the last of her kind. And she is kind of like like an energy vampire, I guess you could say, where she kind of like takes a little bit from people that she sees, a little bit of their life force. And that's how she lives. And she gets younger and she gets older and she gets younger as she feeds. And she is now in present day living in Florida, and she's dealing with enemies.
Okay.
People who have been-
The resurgence of an enemy she thought was
Yeah.
dead a long time ago. So
Yeah.
she has to go on the defensive, basically.
And that's coming out in July.
July.
First issue in July, yeah.
Okay. Who's the artist on that?
Valeria Berzo. She is in Italy. She's
Mhm.
great. She's awesome.
And she did Mignola's Castle Full of Blackbirds. She was the artist.
Oh,
on
solid. Yeah.
that
yeah.
Castle Full of Blackbirds.
And Witches of World War II as well.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. The one with the witches. Well, I forget who put that out. That was a graphic novel.
That's right. Yeah.
What how did that come about with Mad Cave? Like you said, Nick had approached you about writing Vampirella.
Yeah.
With your creator-owned stuff. By the way, I'm a big fan of Mad Cave too, and Mark London and all those guys over there.
They're amazing.
Yeah.
They just sell. We were at C2E2. We had a panel at the same time they were doing their 10-year anniversary panel. So it was really cool. They've been around for 10 years. How did that come about? Like, did you approach them or did you shop it around the Dark Horse or?
I forget who. I think I was talking with Mark Irwin.
Yeah.
At Mad Cave. I've known Mark for years, and he had recently started working with Mad Cave, and I was like, we got this idea, and he was like, show it to me. Yeah. So we showed him the pitch and the characters, and it, like within a matter of time, it was like, yeah, we want to do this.
Yeah.
I mean,
so did you get the artists through Mad Cave that they say, okay, we've got a few artists, or did you?
Yeah, I mean, we had originally had an artist that it didn't quite work out with, and then Mad Cave was like, well, here are these people. Do you like any of these people? How about this one? And we went with Valeria on that. So yeah, so they matched Valeria up with us with this book.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And how many issues will that be? Or is it ongoing? Or
that's six.
6 issues.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
That's really cool that you have a project that's coming out at the same time, like in the summertime.
I know we didn't plan it that way, but
no, we've been working on both of them for like a year.
Yeah.
And neither one had been on a schedule, but they just kind of came out at the same time. We were like, oh, okay, that's good. So keeps us busy.
Well, so if you have been working on it for a year and you have 5 issues of the Vampirella Dark Reflections and you've got 6 issues of I'm sorry, it was Soul
Taker.
Okay. If you have 6 issues of Soul Taker, are you done writing the script for the art and just waiting on the art to wrap up?
Yes.
Yeah.
So that means you two can be working on another project.
And we are. That we can't talk about because it hasn't been announced yet.
Okay. Well,
but it's also for Mad Cave.
Yeah.
They're also publishing it. So you okay?
Yeah, this new one is Mad Cave too. Yeah. This one we're incredibly excited about, and it's killing me not to be able to.
When does that announcement come out? Is that something on Mad Cave?
I don't know. They haven't said.
Yeah, we don't know.
Okay.
We just started working on it.
Yeah.
Oh, exciting. You don't know when it's maybe by San Diego Comic-Con, which is, oh my gosh, it'll be here before you know it. There'll be some kind of announcement.
I would hope so. That would be really cool if they announced it in San Diego. That'd be wild.
That'd be wild.
I know that's where they set up, and usually that's where the big announcements from comic book companies come from. And they wait to do that at San Diego Comic-Con. So it wouldn't surprise me if that's where it is announced. What your new book is. So very cool. Mad Cave has a huge lineup too.
They really do.
The last 2 years they've really turned that company into just this big massive force. I love seeing that. Love seeing them succeed. I mean, Dynamite has been around for a long time too. They're no stranger now. And now they have some huge books that are coming out. Like they're doing a lot of the Disney property stuff. They're doing some Warner Brothers property stuff. It's like the only that hasn't happened since like the 50s that a comic book company is doing both the Disney and Warner Brothers properties. So Nick sure knows how to run his business. So I'm glad you called him Nicky. I think everybody that's friends with him calls him Nicky. So
I've known him for as long as I've been in comics. So
What when you end the Dark Reflections storyline, does it leave it open for more?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Definitely. But it also has a very satisfying ending too, I think. So it doesn't feel like we've left all this stuff hanging. There's a nice feel to it that you could definitely springboard into future
The next
stories.
story.
Yeah.
Now I know that every Vampirella story is different. What would this one be rated, would you say?
I like PG-13.
PG-13.
Well, yeah.
Yeah. There's violence, there's action, there's a little bit of everything. It doesn't go over the top. It's
No.
Most of my stuff is PG-13.
PG-13.
Yeah.
13 years. I was trying to think when I was 13. I was probably reading a lot of stuff I shouldn't have been, but now I have kids and I'm like, so middle school, that would be 12. Yeah, about 12, 13.
Yeah, like 11 to 14-ish, 11 to 13.
Yeah, so see, Jeannine, what you can do is you can make your teacher friends that are teaching the 8th grade make it a school assignment to go and pick up the latest Vampirella comic.
Everybody could get this. Definitely appropriate for 8th grade. It's fine for 8th graders. And probably some 7th graders, not 6th.
Not 6th, yeah.
It'll help them through puberty.
You don't want to get the letter from that parent because this is a good question. What do you feel you've learned from each other as writers? That is a great question.
That is a good question. I've learned probably everything. Everything about writing. All of my writing knowledge is academic, like whether it was like from my own college courses or things like that, or 7th grade teaching 7th graders how to write an essay. But I feel like much like the unit that I brought Tom in to speak to my students about, I've learned like the real world application of writing now, like writing comics, writing books, dealing with publishers, dealing with contracts and things like that. I've learned an awful lot. I think, for me, it's been like the real world stuff. Before it was all just academic, which is real in its own sense, but it's definitely, I've learned probably more in 4 years than I learned, I don't know, maybe teaching my students in like 10. It's been an education. It really has for me.
Oh, I'm sure it's night and day from what you used to do, right?
Yeah.
Although the hours are nicer, right? They get up early at the crack of dawn. And,
I am.
Yeah.
I'm always cracking that whip.
He is, yeah. It's different now because I work weekends. We'll work nights. We work together. We work separately. But now it's more just for me. Before it was so I could, grading or whatever, lesson planning to keep my head above water for the school year. But now it's enjoyment.
Mm-hmm. And what about you, Tom? What have you learned?
It's funny. I've been doing this for so long that you find yourself, and you don't recognize it, I don't think, but you find yourself going through the motions.
Mm-hmm.
You just find, so it's almost as if you're not learning, you're not enjoying yourself really. You're kind of numb. You're just kind of doing what you're supposed to do. There's that deadline. I got to work towards that deadline. And you do good work. I'm not saying that you're like half-assing or anything, but I think you get almost like on a treadmill and you just do it. Jeannine has allowed me to kind of almost like look through her eyes and find the enjoyment in the fun again. In a lot of stuff. Yeah. It's really, it was kind of a wake-up call when we started teaching, especially with the comic stuff. And it was kind of like, wow, I'm having a really good time doing this. I kind of forgot. It's fun. This is like, yes, it's work, and yes, it's hard work, but there's still a lot of enjoyment and excitement that comes from it. and a lot of that comes from me having to kind of like see her excitement and enjoyment of things again. It kind of woke me up a little bit. So
That's a great answer. I like that you are
100% true. It's been so nice to basically almost like re-engage myself in the work. And again, I never want people to think that there were years that I was just kind of like not doing my best work. That is not the case at all. But I think there is a numbness that comes from it when you do it every day for years. Same with writing a novel. It's the same thing. You're sitting down and you're all by yourself and you're just engaged in getting this thing done because you have an editor that's waiting, and you kind of forget I'm going to write this scene today, and that's really fun because of this. You just want to get it done. You want to get it done so somebody's not yelling at you to your book is late, turn it in. So she's actually taught me how to kind of sit back and enjoy it again and have fun doing it.
Man, that is a great answer and a wonderful way of looking at things. So you two seem to have a really big respect and appreciation for each other. I love hearing that. But is there ever a time that you're like talking about a story and you're thinking, Tom, this is so stupid, or Jeannine, no, we're not going to do that, because you're co-writing it, right? So.
Right. I mean, there are times when she has no idea what I'm talking about.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, but I remember when we first started writing our novel together. I explicitly remember saying this. Well, I'll defer to you because you've been doing this for like 40 years. I mean, I have a very good grasp of English and literature and things like that, but I'm kind of coming at it from a different angle. And I always said, I would defer to you. And then I started to actually have opinions on things. And I think now I don't, there are times when I say, all right, fine, that's fine. But then there are times when I'm like, no, that's absolutely not what that character would say. Or no, I don't think that, our character should do that. Or now I'm starting to like have opinions, but that's really his fault because he taught me well.
I don't particularly care for the opinions, but
yeah, I know.
That's your fault.
It's all my fault, but yeah.
You're self to blame.
That's your fault.
Yeah, I guess so.
I think it is true what you're saying, because you get so used to working by yourself, Tom.
Yeah.
For so long, and when somebody, when you are working with somebody else, it kind of sparks that, or it ignites it rather, that spark that sometimes is missing, and you're just feel so exhausted because you're doing it all by yourself. Yep. So it's really cool that you took a break, because I'm assuming you're going to go back to novels too, go back to comics, and kind of like you said, riding a bike, and that probably brought in some new life into your work too.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Because if anything, especially with like a character like Vampirella, she has a different perspective than I do. For one thing, I'm a guy. So the female perspective is something that I can't do. I mean, I can try to think that way, but she is the actual female perspective, and I pay attention to that. I think it really helps our stories and in that interpretation of the character. I think it helps dramatically.
How is it different now? How do you see the character different now than you did back in the 90s when you were writing her?
Oh, wow. It's funny because my take, like even like the last solo things that I did, which was Vengeance, Vampirella, then Vampirella Strikes, she's much more battle weary. I think she's much more like, I'm doing this again. This just keeps going on. It never ends. There's a world weariness to the character that I don't think I quite brought to it in the 90s. I think the 90s was kind of like there was like the time of Buffy and things like that. So there was a high energy, and I wrote Buffy too, so it was like high energy, action packed, wisecracking, and I think the take now, my solo take, anyways, is much more world weary, much more like, all right, this is the job, I got to do it. It might kill me this time, but I don't know. I gotta do it. So I think that's my take. Whereas our take, I think, is much more. I think it's a little more fun, a little more action packed. Yeah, I mean, there's still the horrific elements, and there's still, dour, creepy blackness and darkness and stuff like that. But I think there's an optimism. I think that would be a good way to talk about our stuff. There's an optimism. From the darkness, there's light. That type of thing.
I would think with a character like Vampirella, you have to have a certain balance too.
Yeah,
you have to have that element, that horror element that people are used to.
Yeah, and you also have a lot of the times you have a strong supporting cast.
Mm-hmm.
So that supporting cast provides that balance too. Where her side of the story may be really dark and dour, but then you add like some of the supporting cast members who are a little more jokey, a little more upbeat. That kind of helps kind of pull the story a little bit out of the mire.
And for you, Jeannine, like when you're seeing this character, and you said you had read Tom's stuff, do you see the difference in the character? The way that you all are working on her now?
Yeah, I think I do. Yeah, I think I see a difference. Because I think she's, I don't know, I think especially now in Dark Reflections, I feel like this Vampirella is a little, she's definitely battle weary, but she's a little softer maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Not quite as, this one's pretty world weary.
Yeah, the world that the Lilith character, the daughter of the other Vampirella, this world is incredibly dark. It's basically a world where the Vampirella of that world really screwed up badly. So it's kind of like a correction. This other Vampirella from another world, Lilith, has to kind of help set things right in this world.
Tom, I asked Jeannine if there was a character that she would like to work on next. Is there a character that exists out there that you would love to tackle? You've done Batman, right? You did the Batman Chronicles book.
Yeah, I did Batman. I did. I mean, Hellboy has always been like in the early days, I would have killed to write Hellboy, and now I've written Hellboy. Batman is always Batman as like Bruce Wayne, the whole thing. That would always be fun to do. I would love to do that. But a character I absolutely love that I always tell people that I would write for free if I could is the Creeper.
DC's Creeper.
DC's Creeper. I would write a Creeper book for free. If somebody said to me, "All right, we'll give you a 5-issue miniseries," I would jump on that in a heartbeat.
I'm trying to think the last time there was a Creeper book. It was before the New 52 era. It's been a while since we've done a Creeper.
I think, matter of fact, I think the last regular Creeper book was a miniseries, and I think it was written by Steve Niles.
Yes, that's it. That's the one.
Yeah,
right. That was the last one.
Yeah. No.
Okay, then I have to ask: was that like a childhood character that you liked, or is it just like? Really
it was just one of those things. I love the look. I love the the weirdness of it, and I think the older I got and the more I continued to like the character, the more I saw the potential of the kinds of stories you could tell with the character. Like I see a little bit of me being me, a little bit of reinvention in there, like maybe leaning a little more horrific, like going a little more horror angle, which I think Niles did too in his miniseries. But yeah, I don't know. There's just something about that character. I would love to write that character.
And Jeannine, would you be okay co-writing that character? All right,
right, Ailey. My life is just a series of yeses now. I just say yes.
She doesn't know. She doesn't know the creeper. I've never forced those.
No.
I never forced those on her. I should force them.
Apparently, I need to now.
Yeah.
The good thing about the creeper is that he hasn't been around in so long that really the whole, your homework, your reading homework wouldn't be that much. There's not a lot of it out there.
Yeah.
Editions and
there's really not.
Have to do some research.
Yeah.
What has been the best feedback you got about your writing since pairing up with Jeannine?
Oh wow. Huh. The best feedback. Well, people really seem to like our take. We've had like lots of really positive responses to Vampirella, which is really nice because Vampirella's been around so long. People have opinions, so we've had a lot of really good positive feedback on the Vampirella stuff. We actually even there have been review copies floating around for Soul Taker, our new book. So we've been kind of bracing ourselves for that. And we actually had Joe Lansdale, the horror writer, crime author, who's one of my favorite writers in the world, loved Soul Taker. So that right there makes me I can die happy. I can step back and feel proud about that. But yeah, we've been doing pretty good.
Yeah, really.
I like hearing that.
Yeah.
I'd like to know how authors transition from previous authors' work, like how much they change, make it their own, and how much they try to draw from previous work. I think that's something that happens in comics a lot, right? Especially when you're dealing with not just now the big two, like Marvel and DC, but Dynamite, who has had Vampirella for a long time.
Yep.
Because you have had so many people come and do their own versions of these characters. And at the end of the day, you have to put the toys back. It's the way that I've always heard it.
Well, what's interesting is that I wrote Vampirella for Harris Comics in the 90s. And then Nikki bought Vampirella and now owns Vampirella for Dynamite. So when Vampirella was going to have her 50th anniversary, Nikki approached me and said, would you come back and write a new run of Vengeance of Vampirella, and you can pick up where you left off at Harris. So that was 25 years ago. So I got to basically continue my story where it ended 25 years ago and pick it up in my new run of Vengeance of Vampirella for Dynamite, which was awesome. Because basically it's the Sniegoski verse. It's all the stuff that I created in my run of Vampirella. I can pull out of, no one's touching the toys. It's all my toy box. So my run on Vampirella has been my take on the character that I established in the 90s. So that's been great.
So it's almost like John Byrne and She-Hulk. You were John Byrne wrote and drew She-Hulk, and then he left, and there were about 5 or 6 different writers and artists in between. Then when he came back, he was like, yeah, I don't care what they did. I'm just going to keep writing the way that I wrote it.
Well, if Nikki had said to me he wanted me to continue, but his way to get me to say yes was to say, come back and pick up where you left off. There was no question that's what I wanted to do.
Have they reprinted your work from the
No.
You got us started.
I mean, I say it all the time, but for some reason, I don't know if they don't have the film. I don't know if there's a reason why they haven't collected my Harris run. That's 3 years worth of books. It's really kind of strange. I do not know why they haven't done it.
Well, maybe it's time to give Nikki a call and be like, hey.
I mentioned it to him, and he's like, yeah, I think, you're right. And then nothing happened. So
I think, honestly, we do need collections of Vampirella, the big collections of the older stuff.
Yeah.
So I think and your stuff in there, of course. Yeah.
I mean, I think I'm the guy that has written the character the longest. In terms of content. I mean, I think I'm the guy.
That's a long time to be writing.
A long time. to write that character.
Well, you did take a little bit of a break in between, though.
Oh yeah. Oh, definitely. There were many novels in the middle.
Mhm. And now it's oh my goodness, she's got her own universe. Did you grow up with the character? Like when you got to write it for Harris, did you were you a fan of like the Warren magazine?
Yeah. Well, I always say that she was the magazine that I wasn't supposed to get on the top rack at the store.
You were that 13-year-old.
I was the one looking for the step stool to get to the top shelf.
Yeah, Warren was putting out some great stuff there with Creepy, Eerie, and Vampirella. I love those books.
Oh yeah.
Now that is something that Dynamite has done that I wish they would go back and keep going to, is the Dynamite collections of the classic Warren stuff of Vampirella.
Yeah.
Black and white stuff. There's beautiful artwork in there and some solid stories.
Yeah. Yep.
Now, as we bring this interview to a close, I always like to ask creators that I have on, is there any words of advice that you would give to people that are trying to write comics themselves? Like, what kind of words would you give? Like, if you could go back in time, Tom, and tell yourself something inspiring.
Keep working. Keep doing what you're doing. Keep the enthusiasm. Keep being excited. Keep reading everything you could possibly get your hands on, and incorporate that into your work. That's the hugest thing. Is I think it's very, very easy to get knocked down and not think that you have a chance, or nobody's going to care, or nobody wants to read this. If you really love it and you want to do it, then find a way. I think that there's so many opportunities now for comics in terms of like digital production and stuff like that. You get your stuff thrown up online. You don't have to have a printed book anymore. You can do it, on a website. It's if you want to do it, then do it. Don't come up with all kinds of excuses as to why you can't. If you love it and you want to do it, then you do it. Same with any kind of writing. Book writing, short story writing, novella writing, screenplays, whatever. If you want to do it, there's plenty of. If you don't know how to do it, there are plenty of resources out there too. Now, there weren't any resources when I started writing comics. I didn't even know what a comic script looked like, and there was no way I could get my hands on one. I think the first comic script I ever saw was the artist Steve Bissette, who drew Swamp Thing.
Mm-hmm.
Gave me an Alan Moore script from Swamp Thing.
Oh my God.
And it was the most, it was the size of a phone book.
Yes.
One issue, the size of a phone book. It was just notes. And it was amazing. So that's what I kind of learned from. I kind of looked at that.
You write scripts like that, Tom?
No.
Okay.
No, I don't have that.
Because if I was Jeannine, I would have bounced. I'd be like, you know what? You're on your own, Tom. I'm going to stick.
For one thing, we have deadlines. It'd be like no way in hell that I would be able to like write that expensive of a script. And that was like all the scripts that he turned in.
Yes. I always tell people when they're trying to become artists to look up comic strips. Stay away from Alan Moore's comic strips.
Because they're brilliant. They're absolutely
they're wonderful, but like the detailed information that he tells about each panel and where to put the oh my gosh, forget it.
Yeah.
Like I remember Dave Gibbons talking about that, like just showcasing some of the script for for Watchmen, and it was just amazing that it's like a novel you're reading through this script.
Yeah.
So, man, that was your first one.
That was my first script. That was my first script.
And you still wanted to do it. You're like, I could do this.
Well, I loved Swamp Thing. I thought Swamp Thing was like the most amazing horror comic that I'd ever read. So it was kind of like it was eye-opening to kind of see it. The bones before the artwork was done. So.
What about you, Jeannine? What words of advice would you have somebody that wants to write comics?
All my stuff.
I stole all your
That's what happens when you have a co-writer. He's going to take credit for it.
Yeah. Well, if you can't get a co-writer who's already done everything, then I think reading a lot of different things too. I have read a lot of Batman. I've read, some superhero stuff. That stuff doesn't really speak to me, but give me a good, James Tynion story or something like that, and I'm like all over that. Sandman, like read all different kinds of things to see what really speaks to you. See what you're comfortable with. Like I don't think I'd be comfortable writing a superhero like Superman or something like that, but find what you like to read, and maybe that's what you're able to write.
Would if any of your kids, when you were still teaching school, had approached you and been like, I want to be a comic book writer, what advice would you give them that's different? Like somebody that at that age, read more classics or read more comics?
Everything.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think everything. And also, trying to remember which one was my favorite. I think the Bendis book was my favorite. Words for Pictures, writing about writing comics. Like get a good book that's going to, help you figure it out, because my students could write essays and they could write short stories, but writing comics is a completely different arena, and it's challenging. And I don't know, I'm a good book learner, so Tom bought me, I think I have like 4 books on my shelf about writing comics that really help, so those could help kids too. But yeah, just I think reading is probably the biggest way to make it.
That's great advice, Tom. You stole all her good advice, but
that's what I do.
Solid advice though. I do like the idea of reading everything too. I remember it was Gail Simone talking about how she's always heard, people giving advice of like, write what you know. And she actually said, try writing what you don't know, because researching the stuff is really where it's at. And that's what you're going to have to do when it comes to writing.
Yeah, that's true.
Even if it's something like, science fiction, you still have to write things about the cities and the people and the places and events that have happened. So it's going to, you're going to have to get comfortable with the idea of writing things you don't know.
Yeah. You have to convince people, what you're talking about.
That's true. Well, if your name's on the book, I assume you know what you're talking about.
Well, you'd be amazed.
You'd be surprised.
I've had people stop me at conventions and talk about a location. I think it was one of my books, and they were saying, "When did you visit?" And I had never been there before. Mm-hmm. So obviously, my research is pretty damn good. if I could convince them that I had been there. So
that's right. Well, at this time, I just want to thank both of you for joining me, for taking the time to talk about Vampirella Dark Reflections and your career in comic books. And I hope to see more and more of your work. We know you've got the Soul Stealer, right? Soul Taker.
Coming out in July.
And that is from Mad Cave.
Yeah.
And in June is the Dark Reflections. And you've got another unannounced book coming out from Mad Cave that you can't wait to talk about.
Soon, I hope.
I was gonna ask some questions about that, but you know what? With all these announcements of like Dick Tracy and Space Ghost, I'm like,
you don't want to steal.
I'll leave it alone. I'll wait. I'll wait to find out.
We'll come on again and talk.
Come back, yeah.
Well, that sounds like a plan. Yeah. Thank you both for being here, and thank you all so much for watching. And go and check out Vampirella Dark Reflections or anything these two wonderful folks have written. What was the book series that you both wrote together?
Oh, it hasn't been published yet.
Oh, do we have a title, or did you make an announcement?
We have not. The novel is still this miasma of us sitting down and having to like really trim the fat and stuff like that.
So the comic is coming out first. That beat out the novel.
Though we do have a novella coming out in January called Nira from
Bad Hand Books.
From Bad Hand Books. So that's definitely on a schedule, and it's called Nira, Nira.
Awesome. Well, look forward to that then. Thank you again, everybody. Smash that like button on the way out, and have a wonderful, wonderful day.